Okay. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. الصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما تعلمنا وزدنا بفضلك علما وتعليما إنك على كل شيء قدير. So he says, reciting in the prayer on a journey. أخبرنا مالك حدثنا نافع أن ابن عمر كان يقرأ في الصبح العشر السور, right? سكون, because it's describing something feminine. العشر السور من أول المفصل يرددهن في كل ركعة سورة. Right, so Malik informed us that Nafi' narrated to us that when traveling, Ibn Umar used to recite the dawn prayer, there's 10 surahs from the beginning of Al-Mufassal. Mufassal meaning the broken up ones. Right, so short surahs that are short, because they are Mufassal, they are broken up. As opposed to a surah that is long and is not broken up by Fatiha, by the Basmalah, for example. Repeating them one surah in each rak'ah. قال محمد يقرأ في الفجر في السفر السماء ذات البروج والسماء والطارق ونحوهما. Right, you're reciting shorter surahs that you don't normally recite in Fajr. Right, Fajr you usually recite longer surahs. Right, so we're saying that on a journey, we recite shorter surahs. That's what we still do with prayers. Okay, so now we have point of contention. Right, and we're going to see how Imam Muhammad deals with this. باب الجمع بين الصلاتين في السفر والمطر, combining two prayers on a journey or in rain. أخبرنا مالك أخبرنا نافع عن ابن عمر أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم كان إذا عجل به السير جمع بين المغرب والعشاء. Malik informed us from Nafi' from Ibn Umar that the Messenger of Allah, right? So super unbelievably sahih hadith, right? It's not a historical fact, but it is very, very strong. That he would, when traveling in a hurry, combine Maghrib and Isha. So the outward purport of the hadith is A, journey, B, hurry. Okay? Does not mention distance, just says journey and hurry. Okay? أخبرنا مالك حدثنا نافع أن ابن عمر حين جمع بين المغرب أن ابن عمر حين جمع بين المغرب والعشاء في السفر سار حتى غاب الشفق. Okay, so the hadith that we just quoted, is it crystal clear that the prayer times changed? This hadith here, he used to combine Maghrib and Isha. Is that crystal clear that the prayer times are actually changing?
No.
It is not. Okay. When I read the hadith, what's obvious to me is that the Prophet ﷺ joined, meaning he combined Maghrib and Isha in Maghrib time or Maghrib and Isha in Isha time. That's what's obvious to me. It's because I'm Shafi'i and because the word joining has that sense in my head. But linguistically, that's not necessarily the case. So it's not valid to use terminology or concepts that we have to superimpose onto a hadith. Now, look at the process. Here's the hadith. What does the hadith mean? Did he change the prayer times or did he not change the prayer times? So now Imam Malik says, my teacher Nafi', the freed slave of Ibn Umar, said that Ibn Umar, we'll read the hadith, or the quote at least, the athar, that Nafi', that when combining Maghrib and Isha, how did he actually do this? How did he understand the hadith that I just quoted? He would travel until the redness of the sky had disappeared. Meaning, Maghrib was over, period, finished. So Ibn Umar is, so see how Imam Malik is functioning. Imam Malik is functioning the following way. He is looking at a hadith through a lens of Amal Ahl Medina, or you could say Ibn Umar, right? So this is a methodology. This is a methodology of the Hanafis and the Malikis, is to look at a hadith or a verse of the Quran through the lens of certain fuqaha. Okay? Certain fuqaha. So this is called inherited fiqh, al-fiqh al-mawruth, right? That's one tradition. Imam Shafi comes along later on and says, I'm the student of all of these people, right? I can't use this lens or that lens. I have to use no lens as much as humanly possible. So the lens that Imam Shafi is going to use is consensus, whatever all Muslims agree on, Arabic language, right? And so that's why Imam Shafi is the first person who wrote on usul, because he's saying now that we're doing this by ourselves effectively, we need to have some system, some hermeneutics in order to start taking this thing apart. Because if all we have is consensus, that is a very thin lens. Imam Malik's lens is very thick. He's saying, what do the people of Medina do? That is the lens through which we will interpret the Quran and Sunnah, right? With the Hanafis, to some extent, the way of Kufans, right? That's how we're going to interpret things. But see, the process here is not just reading the Hadith. He's reading the Hadith through the eyes of the Sahabi. And that's where things get lost, right? And so Imam Shafi'i, in theory, is looking at the Quran and Sunnah through the lens of consensus, which is very broad. And, that's about it. In reality, Imam Shafi'i is looking at it through the lens of the Maliki school, because study with Imam Malik, through the lens of the Hanafi school, and through the lens of other schools. So he's not coming from a vacuum. It's a key concept. So people who come today and say Quran and Sunnah, they're saying Quran and Sunnah in a vacuum. And then you see a huge difference between their interpretation of the deen and the interpretation of the deen of the people of the former Dhahib. Because in reality, then Imam Shafi, Imam Ahmad, Imam Malik, Imam Abu Hanifa, and the former Dhahib, there's lenses that they are using, right? There's a lens. They're not looking at it in a vacuum. You're going to find tons of the Maliki school and the Shafi school, tons of it, because he's not looking at a vacuum, right? So Imam Malik is saying, I am looking at the previous hadith through the lens of Ibn Umar at least, that he would actually wait until Maghrib has finished, i.e., joining prayer means delaying a prayer past its prayer time and joining with the next prayer time, or bringing a prayer time before its time into the previous time. Okay? So, i.e., that's what it means to join. It means to change the prayer time. That's what he's trying to say. أخبرنا مالك أخبرنا داود بن حسيني أن عبد الرحمن بن هرمز أخبره قال, so this is a gap in the chain here, this is not a Sahabi. قال كان رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يجمع بين الظهر والعصر في سفر إلى تبوك. So Imam Malik informed from Dawood Hussein from Abdurrahman ibn Hurmuz. He said the Messenger of Allah combined Dhuhr and Asr on his journey back to Tabuk. Right, so Tabuk. So yes, the hadith is sahih, with slightly different chain. But again, what does it mean? This is not crystal clear. The first hadith is not crystal clear, but Imam Malik is in understanding it through this lens here. Imam Malik informed us that okay. And then he says, قال محمد وبهذا نأخذ. We follow that what you're saying, not a problem. والجمع بين الصلاتين أن تؤخر الأولى منهما فتصلي في آخر وقتها وتعجل الثانية فتصلي في أول وقتها. وقد بلغنا عن ابن عمر أنه صلى المغرب حين أخر الصلاة قبل أن تغيب الشفق خلاف ما روى مالك. So he said, so Imam Muhammad says, we adhere to this. We have no problem with the hadith. Our issue is not whether or not we follow the hadith. The issue is how the hadith has been understood, right? The semantics of it, right? That the first is delayed so that it is prayed in its latest time, and the second is hastened so that it is prayed in the first of its time. A report had reached us from Ibn Umar. You're looking through the lens of Ibn Umar, guys. We are also looking from the lens of Ibn Umar. He's also a Sahabi. We respect him as well. That when delaying the prayer, he prayed Maghrib before the redness of the sky disappeared. This is at variance with what Imam Malik stated. Okay? Now, according to Imam Abu Hanifa himself, when does Isha come in? When the
After
redness of the sky
whiteness.
disappears, or when the
After the whiteness.
white of the sky disappears. So in which case, according to Imam Abu Hanifa, what Ibn Umar did is a non-issue. He delayed Maghrib until the end of his time. What's wrong with that? Not a problem. According to Imam Muhammad disagrees with Imam with his teacher on that issue. He says Maghrib ends when the red disappears. Imam Muhammad said that. So for him, there's a conflict, right? Imam Malik is telling him one thing from Ibn Umar, and so he's something else. Now here's the problem though. Who has a more accurate chain to Ibn Umar? Imam Malik or Imam Muhammad? Imam Malik is studying with the freed slave Nafi', right? From Ibn Umar. That is the very, very strong connection. So when you come along, Muhammad, and say, oh, actually, Imam Muhammad, astaghfirullah, and he comes along and says, oh, I actually have another report, your report is probably shadh. Your probably report is not correct. Because Imam Muhammad, Ibn Umar is in Medina, his free slave is in Medina, this is the teacher of Imam Malik. Don't come and tell me about my own teachers, right? Tell me about Abdullah Mas'ud, he's in Kufa. Tell me about Abu Musa al-Ashari. Tell me about Sayyidina Ali. Fine. You know, they were asked Imam Malik, they said, why don't you know it from Sayyidina Ali? He said, I have a book from his hadith, that's all. But I haven't like received his hadiths. Right? So Sayyidina Ali, Kufa. Abu Musa al-Ashari, Kufa. Abdullah Mas'ud, Kufa. Okay, don't come and tell me about Ibn Umar. Ibn Umar is in Medina. Right? So here's the issue of tarjih in terms of narration. Anyway, so he said, Muhammad, and then he says, okay, next quote. So it says, أخبرنا مالك حدثنا نافع عن ابن عمر أنه كان إذا جمع الأمراء بين المغرب والعشاء جمع معهم في المطر. So Imam Malik said that Nafi' said that Ibn Umar that when the governors combined, the governors that were made governors in Medina used to join Maghrib and Isha, they would combine them with them when it was raining. Okay, so now again, this is the lens. We're going to see a hadith in a second. Where is it? Not even here. It doesn't even quote it. Okay, so he quotes that, but doesn't quote it. So there's another super important hadith. Okay, so I'm just going to bring the Muwatta of Imam Malik itself. Aman, you have the Muwatta with you?
Yeah, I do.
Can you try and find this chapter?
Sure. Give me 1 second.
This better demonstrates this whole concept of lens. Okay.
Sheikh Imam Muhammad has not narrated some
Yeah, he
hadith
didn't.
in Muwatta.
He has his tasarruf, like he's he's like editing, he's like picking and choosing what's relevant. It doesn't follow. So if you look at the other Muwatta'at, it is clearly so it's not really a book that's published, obviously, but it's kind of a book, right? If you compare the Muwatta of Yahya ibn Yahya al-Laythi, the Muwatta of al-Qa'nabi, the Muwatta of others, what's his name? Forgotten his name now. The other familiar Muwatta, like Ibn Qasim, right? They follow the same kind of thing, same kind of hadith are used. Whereas the Muwatta Imam Muhammad is more like a rebuttal, right? I'm going to mention the main things that this teacher is saying, and then I'm going to add my objection. And he has another book which is purely a rebuttal, which is called Al-Hujjah ala Ahl Medina, right? The proof against the people of Medina, right? Like that's Imam, another book of Imam Muhammad, right? Where he's trying to these issues of contention, but he doesn't quote everything. And there's one hadith that he quotes and nobody else quotes, which is Innamal a'malu binniyat. So Imam Muhammad, I don't know where he quotes it. He cites that from Imam Malik, and no one else quotes that from Imam Malik, as far as I know.
Okay.
Sheikh, so this is basically a snapshot of the Muwatta at the time he was studying under him, right?
Not a snapshot, it is him choosing key things that are interesting. So
Okay,
it's his
oh,
own it's his own edition.
okay, got it.
Yeah.
What
So
is
you
the
can't say
chapter
you
specifically
couldn't say,
called?
for example, oh, Imam Muhammad didn't narrate this, so therefore the other narration is weak. Like that doesn't make any sense. No, it's just that. And generally speaking, the Muwatta is found in the six books because the six books, generally speaking, whenever they're quoting somebody from Imam Malik, they're quoting that person teaching the Muwatta. So imagine you went to Imam Malik and you studied the Muwatta and then you taught the Muwatta in Baghdad. Okay. Now I'm in Baghdad and I'm hearing it. I'm taking the content of the Muwatta and rearranging it in different chapters in my own book. So whenever anybody quotes Imam Malik, you're basically quoting the Muwatta. So that's why the Muwatta is so important. It's so central to the six books. You found it, Aman?
Yeah, 205.
Okay, go ahead. So it has the same quote, this one about joining for Maghrib and Isha during rain.
I can't find that one specifically. What is the chapters called? Is
It's
it
talking about
performing the prayer
joining prayers in a city, or joining prayers while not
at
traveling.
Muzdalifah?
Before that should be like on Hajj, but it should be like joining prayers. Let me find it, Muhammad. Okay, Aman. Okay, give me 1 second.
Okay, no problem.
There's a chapter called Shortening of Prayers.
So this is the Muwatta, okay? So it's chapter, I have chapter 9. It says, chapter concerning shortening the prayer while traveling, and then subsection number 1, concerning joining the prayer while in a city or while on the journey, okay? So we have this self-same hadith that Imam Muhammad quoted from Imam Malik, from Dawood ibn Hussein, from Al-A'raj, from Abu Huraira. So it wasn't complete though. In Muhammad's version, it missed Abu Huraira, so it was a gap in the chain. But the hadith is sahih, right? That the Prophet joined Dhuhr and Asr on his journey in Tabuk. Okay, this hadith is in Bukhari and Muslim, etc. everywhere. Okay, fantastic. So then, it mentions that hadith. Okay, then it mentions the next hadith down here. From Malik, from Nafi', that Abdullah ibn Umar used to that the Messenger of Allah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam used to, when he was in a hurry, he wished to join Maghrib and Isha. Same hadith that we saw, right?
Okay,
There's like someone's speaking in the background. Okay. The next hadith then, it says, this hadith, this is what I want to talk about. So I want you now to throw everything you know about Islam out the window. Okay, and just read the text as it is. Okay, Aman, keep trying to find it. Okay, should be the first section of shortening the prayer. Okay, so it says Malik narrates from Abu Zubayr al-Makki, from Sa'id ibn Jubair. Okay, this is the one that Hajjaj had executed. From Abdullah ibn Abbas. Okay, that he said, Salla Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam al-dhuhr wal-asr jami'an. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam joined dhuhr and asr and maghrib and isha together. في غير خوف ولا سفر, without any fear and without any travel. Okay? Forget everything you know about Islam. Are you allowed to join Maghrib and Isha, sorry, Dhuhr and Asr, and Maghrib and Isha for no reason?
no.
Okay? Does the hadith say he joined for a reason?
Yes.
No, it said he joined with no fear and no travel. He was not traveling and there was no fear.
It rules out two reasons.
Okay, so what other reason could you have?
The chapter was named Matar.
Okay, forget the chapter name. Just the hadith as it is. I want to remove every assumption you have about Islam. If I were reading this, I think the outward purport of this hadith is that you can just join Dhuhr and Asr and Maghrib and Isha, and that's it. You can just join them,
Yeah, makes
Yeah, that
sense.
would be
right? That's what the
yeah,
hadith says.
Yeah.
apparent.
Okay, that's the apparent hadith. Now, along comes Imam Malik and says, قال مالك أرى ذلك كان في مطر. I think that's in rain. Like, where did that come from? Right? And in fact, there's an extra part of the hadith that's not mentioned here. So this hadith is super sahih. So it's not just Sa'id ibn Jubayr. It's like 3 or 4 of Ibn Abbas's students quoting him. So it's basically mutawatir from Ibn Abbas. Okay? It's almost mutawatir from Ibn Abbas. Like it's a super sahih hadith. The gap between us and the hadith is just Ibn Abbas. Okay? And Ibn Abbas was asked by his student, oh, why, why did he do that? He says he didn't want to make things difficult for people. That's it. He didn't want to make things difficult for people, so he joined the prayers.
So Ibn Abbas
This
did
hadith is
tasawwur.
fundamentally problematic, okay? But now let's look at the approach of Imam Malik. I have scripture in front of me. I have revelation in front of me. I have the Quran. I have the Sunnah in front of me. How do I understand the Sunnah? For Imam Malik, I understand the Sunnah through the lens of Amal of Ahl Medina. So he's going to come along and he's going to say, aha, Ibn Omar, my teacher's teacher, used to join prayers with the rulers between Maghrib and Isha specifically, not Dhuhr and Asr, and it used to be in rain. So Imam Malik's going to come along and he's going to say, this hadith, I don't understand what it means. It kind of throws everything out the window, but I'm going to look at it through a very thick and complex lens, which means it doesn't mean that the process that you can join Dhuhr and Asr and Maghrib and Isha for no reason. It means you can't join Dhuhr and Asr and you can join Maghrib and Isha for a reason. And that reason is rain. So you say, like, how on earth did you read that hadith and come to that conclusion? Like, where does it say rain, for crying out loud? Where does it say, like, how did you exclude Dhuhr and Asr? Very simply, look at the lens through which I use. I am Imam Malik. I have studied with the tabi'een, the people who received the deen, the people who grew up in the city of the Prophet ﷺ. The way they practice the deen is the deen. And so the fact that Ibn Umar showed my teacher to join for rain between Maghrib and Isha specifically, that's what the hadith means. Full stop. So I'm not just following the hadith like that, I'm following the hadith through a lens. Okay, this is how Imam Malik is working. Same thing with any verse of the Quran. Doesn't matter what it is. I'm going to look at this verse of the Quran through this lens. There are countless verses, right, where the majority of the scholars do not apply. Like, oh, this verse, oh, it says this. Like, it's not really a fiqh issue. It's not really a fundamental. Or this verse means this. Like, where did they get that from? They're looking through the verse through the eyes of the Sahaba and Tabi'een. That's how they're doing it. So that's what Imam Malik is doing. Okay? Now I come along as a Shafi'i, right? And Shafi'is, we follow Amal Ahl Medina, right? Is that correct?
No.
No, we don't, right?
No,
We are
no.
we're revolutionaries, right? No, only consensus, only Quran, only Hadith, only what's it called? Sahih Hadith, right?
Asar based, right?
We're based on the Hadith. So what does Imam Shafi do? He comes along and he says, look, listen to the following. The Hadith says you can join Dhuhr and Asr and Maghrib and Isha. And his teacher said it's in rain. So what does Imam Shafi do? Imam Shafi thins the lens. He says, how can you apply half of the hadith? The hadith says Dhuhr and Asr and Maghrib and Isha. How can you apply half of the hadith? So Imam Shafi says you can join Dhuhr and Asr and Maghrib and Isha, but only for rain. Where did Imam Shafi get rain from?
From Imam Malik.
Imam Malik, right? Or Ibn Umar, if you want to call it, right? So Imam Shafi is still using a lens. He's still using a lens. He's not just looking at something as we interpreted it. We read the hadith and there we go, great. Right? Just join prayers whenever you want. He's looking through a lens. Right? He's doing that. He's not coming in a vacuum. Nobody's doing that. However, he does tweak it. He says that lens has to be thinner. It's too thick. Right? You've cut out, it's like a lens that cuts out yellow and it cuts out red and it cuts out blue. So, well, I can't see any colors now. Okay, thin that lens. I want something just cuts out just this, just cuts out that. Okay, but he has a lens. He's looking it through the eyes of the Salaf. Right? Why is Taraweeh 20 rak'ahs? That's what the Salaf did. Oh, that's a strange way to understand the hadith. Right? But that's how it works. Go ahead, Azhar.
Sheikh, just the initial part and the hadith specifically mentions that it was combined without any of the reason. So I just want you to re-explain the part how Imam Malik came to the conclusion that it is applicable for the rain part. I didn't get that.
Because what comes next in the Muwatta? It says that Malik narrates from Nafi' that Abdullah ibn Umar used to join with the rulers Maghrib and Isha in rain. So he joins it, Maghrib and Isha in rain.
But it mentions in that hadith specifically without a reason, right? So I
Yeah, so
understand
he's saying the hadith mentions without a reason. I'm going to read
okay.
the hadith through the eyes of Ibn Umar. Ibn Umar used to join Maghrib and Isha specifically, and he used to do it for rain. So I will do that.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Okay, I get it because the subsequent hadith actually gives a new dimension to the initial hadith, right?
Exactly.
Like
And
that.
so the person who's just reading the hadith, I'm just Quran and Sunnah, you have no lens, right? In reality, you do have a lens, but they don't know what the lens you're using is. But you have no lens, right? But Imam Malik has a very thick lens. It's a very thick lens. It's a very complex lens, and it cuts out lots of things. Okay. Now I want you to tell me answer the following question: who has a thicker lens or a more complex lens, Imam Ahmad or Imam Ash-Shafi'i? Because Imam Ahmad, okay, he says the following. He says this hadith, okay, where is it? This hadith here. He joined Dhuhr and Asr and Maghrib and Isha. Okay. Imam Ahmad says there's two types of joining in a city, in a non-traveler. For the individual, okay, and for the masjid. If you join in a masjid, it has to be at night specifically. So you join for rain or the like heavy wind or snow or something like that, but it has to be specifically Maghrib and Isha. Where does Imam Ahmad get that from?
From Imam Malik or
Ahmad
Nafi'.
Imam Malik or Nafi' or Ibn Umar. Ibn
Ibn
Umar
Umar.
specifically joining like that, right? And others as well. Okay, so Imam Ahmad, okay, he's very much also affected by that same system. Imam Ahmad does not look through a hadith in a vacuum. So Imam Ahmad frequently said, he would say this, yeah, the hadith is weak, but alakin alayhi al-amal. He said the hadith is weak, yeah, but everybody applies it. Right? So you come along and say the hadith is weak, throw it out the window. And Imam Ahmad comes along and says, no, the hadith is weak, but alakin alayhi amal. Right? The hadith is acted upon. Well, you say the hadith is sahih, why are you ignoring it? So, yeah, but nobody applies it. Right? So if you look at all of the four Imams, everybody is looking at the hadith of the Quran through the lens of the Sahaba Tabi'een, and they're not just doing anything. Okay? Now, along comes Ibn Mundhir, and he says the following. Ibn Mundhir, following Shafi Usul. Okay? Following Shafi Usul. Okay? And he says, the Prophet ﷺ joined Maghrib and Isha, okay? And Dhuhr and Asr. And it does not mention rain. So where'd you get rain from? They come from anywhere. So Imam Ibn Mundhir, he comes along and he's applying the Shafi usul proper, if that makes sense. He's almost, the lens that he has is more Shafi than his grand Sheikh, Imam Shafi himself. Ibn Mundhir, he's a very early Shafi, right? So he says, yeah, you can just join Maghrib and Isha, Dhuhr and Asr, Maghrib and Isha for a difficulty. Now, what lens is he using though? He's using his fiqh lens. He's like, obviously, you can't join prayers for no reason because then there would be no prayer time, would there? So Ibn Mundhir, in reality, is looking at the hadith through the eyes of a faqih. The eyes of the faqih says, we all know that haram does not become halal for no reason. Haram either becomes halal because of duress, darura, and there's no darura here, or because of haja amma, or a widespread common difficulty, like, for example, being able to pray with najasa on your private parts, because that's excused, because you need to go to the bathroom regularly, being able to join prayers on a journey because it's difficult and applies to a lot of people, being able to break your fast on a journey and applies to a lot of people. So al-haja tanzilat manzilat darura. That's a qaida in fiqhiyya. Principle in fiqh is a difficulty when it is common and widespread and kind of ubiquitous, then it will be treated as if it is duress. So he's not, again, he's not working in a vacuum either. He's because he has fiqh. He's studied fiqh. He understands what fiqh is. He understands how the Sharia works. And so he says, yeah, and like, as long as you have a reason, like any reason, like it doesn't specifically have to be rain, you can just join, that's fine. But it has to be some kind of difficulty, right? And then along comes many of the Shafis and they agree with Ibn Mundhir. And then along comes Ibn Hajar al-Haytami, right, the 10th century scholar, and says, yeah, he says, what must they mean by that? They must mean something that would allow one to make tayammum, that kind of difficulty. So they have a very clear dabit, right? A very clear definition of it, right? And then even Imam Ahmad has a similar kind of fatwa as well. So for the group prayer, right, from the group prayer, it has to be at night specifically because that's what Ibn Umar did. But for the individual, you can join for various difficulties, and then they specify them in Hamd fiqh books. The point I'm trying to make, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, right? There's no boys and girls in this class right now. Is nobody is coming along to a hadith and saying, well, it says this, get out of my face. That's what it says. Khalas. You don't like the Prophet ﷺ, it's your problem. Nobody is doing that. Nobody. Everybody is coming along and looking the hadith through a lens. The Kufan lens, the Medinan lens, right? A mix of the two, right? They're affected by this, affected by that. And the very, very least, at least fiqh, they have fiqh, right? They have principles in their head, right? And it makes you want to pull your hair out when somebody comes along and says, well, the hadith says this. Brother, your interpretation of the hadith is so unbelievably off. Why? You're not looking through the lens of this or the lens of that, and you have zero fiqh. You're not thinking as a scholar. You have no training because you are coming out of nowhere, and you're a mubtadi' in reality. Am I making sense?
Yes.
Makes sense, Ashar, Muhammad, Muzaffar?
Yes, Sheikh.
Okay. So now, imagine I'm in Kufa, and I'm reading these hadiths. Number one, I'm like, who is Abdullah ibn Umar compared to Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, for crying out loud? Right? Like we all know Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, the king of fuqaha. Right? He's like the king of fuqaha. He's like our grand sheikh, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. Right? They asked Abu Musa al-Ashari a question. He's like, why are you asking me? Go and ask Abdullah Mas'ud. Right? He's like one of the greatest fuqaha ever. So you're in Kufa and you have Abdullah Mas'ud. Then after him, you have people like Ibrahim al-Nakha'i. Okay, and none of them join prayers. And your grand sheikh, Abdullah Mas'ud, said the Prophet ﷺ never ever joined prayers. And in fact, Sayyidina Abdullah said that Sayyidina Umar also forbade joining prayers. So any of these things, even if they ever happened, they're abrogated. Right? I'm not joining prayers, for crying out loud. A, either it means you've misunderstood the hadith. B, your fuqaha and your sources are nowhere on the level of our sources. And number two, right, even if it did ever happen, yeah, that was just a one-off or whatever. I don't know what that is. Nobody does that. Okay, so let's look at how Imam Muhammad deals with this. Okay, forgive my I know when I'm speaking, I speak. Sometimes I use language that's a bit aggressive. I understand with people who are not native British English speakers, or even American English speakers, it sounds a bit aggressive. Please forgive me for being not so polite, but it kind of for the rhetoric, inshallah. Go ahead, Aman.
So just for me to like understand correctly, basically the Kufan school and the Medinan school, they're questioning each other's validity or just their opinions.
Internally, they're happy with their own system. Internally,
Okay.
we have the biggest scholars and the greatest scholars, and that's it.
Okay.
And we interpret the Quran and Sunnah through the eyes of our great scholars. That's how we do
Okay.
it, right?
All right.
But the issue then is what happens then if you're great and they're great, then does that cancel each other out? So that's what happens with Imam Shafi. Imam Shafi is very, what's the word? Imam Shafi's usul is very, what's the word? Conservative, very limiting. Like he doesn't have many proofs that he uses. He doesn't use the Kufan per se, and doesn't use the Meccan per se, right? Because he says, well, you cancel each other out, don't you? Like he,
I see.
initially he used to rely heavily on the hadiths from Medina and Mecca. And then afterwards he realized, you know what? That's not even fair. Why should I, for example, exclude hadiths from a certain area? So he said, yeah, just quote any hadith. Any hadith that I don't even know, add it to my madhab. Right? So he
Oh,
became
so
very,
even it's from the Kufan school.
yeah, and so not
Okay.
just the Kufan school in terms of fatwa, but in terms of basically he's saying the Kufan school is not a proof itself,
Hmm.
right? The Medina school is not a proof itself. Hadith
Yeah.
is a proof, the Quran is hadith, and then consensus, meaning all
Right.
schools across the whole thing. So, for example, saying Ameen, that's not the Kufan school or the Medinan school,
Yeah. Yeah.
Meccan school. But yeah, saying Ameen aloud, yeah, we do it, right? And so
Okay.
it's a kind
Makes
of
sense.
it's a mix or a deletion, if that makes sense. Like
Okay.
when you mix colors, you kind of delete
Yeah.
them. So that's why it's
Right.
kind of
Right.
so then that's the thing is so the Shafi's methodology or the philosophy leads to this mentality. Yeah, I just read the Quran and do what I want. It leads to that. Like he was the kind of the
Oh, I see.
stepping stone to it, but he didn't make that step,
No.
right? He didn't make that step.
All
And
right.
when you see how he works, there's a fundamental difference between him and his students and his graduates versus a modern approach, which is, well, it's in the hadith, leave me alone. It's in the Quran,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? That kind of attitude. Okay, so
Okay.
now let's look at how Imam Muhammad deals with this. Okay, so it says, so number one says we adhere to this. Yes, we agree to the hadith. However, I'm going to interpret the hadith in my way, which is to delay the prayer to the end of its time. Okay, so he did that one. We did this one as well. And he says, قال لسنا نأخذ بهذا. As for this, you're going to quote a hadith from the Prophet ﷺ? Fine, and I can interpret it in a way that follows my school? Yes. As for this, who's Ibn Umar compared to Abdullah Mas'ud? Right? Who is Nafi' compared to our shuyukh? Right? It's like you're not on our level, and I don't want to follow it. So he says, لا نجمع بين الصلاتين في وقت واحد إلا الظهر والعصر بعرفة والمغرب والعشاء بمزدلفة وهو قول أبو حنيفة رحمه الله. Says he said, we do not adhere to this. No, sorry, I'm not going to follow you there. We do not combine two prayers in one time, except Dhuhr and Asr at Arafah and Maghrib and Isha at Muzdalifah. Why? Because this is mutawatir. This is mutawatir, right? If you look at the logic of the Hanafis, the logic of the Hanafis is very, very strong. Read the verse of the Quran. Inna salata kanat ala al-mu'minina kitaban mawquta. Right? Indeed, the prayer was and ever will be at fixed appointed times. Which verses just come before it? Try and find it now. Which verses just come before it? Indeed. So if we look up Google, Sheikh Google, ask Siri, Alexa, where are we going to use? Right? I'm sure in Singapore they have something else. Please find me the verse. Alexa, give me a fatwa.
Check the words before it.
Yes. What's verses come before it? It's talking about a particular scenario and how to do something in a particular scenario.
Salat al-Khawf.
What is Salat al-Khawf, Muzaffar?
It's prayed during war,
Good.
battle.
So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes in detail how to pray in group prayer in war. So you're telling me that if you don't want to go to the prayer because you haven't finished your food, if you don't want to go to prayer because it's raining outside, if you don't want to go to the prayer if it's difficult, you're telling me you can join prayers on a journey which is not an issue of life and death, and you can join prayers because of rain, which is not an issue of life and death. But in war, on an issue of life and death, you have to change the form of the prayer and bend over backwards in order to pray together and on time. That doesn't make any sense, right? And if you look specifically, okay, specifically at the Hanbali school, so the Hanbali school, they will say you can join prayers for fear of life or limb. And then you go skip forward, Salat al-Khawf. You can do Salat al-Khawf for fear of life and limb. That doesn't make any sense. That means you have two rukhsas for one thing. There's two dispensations to solve one problem. That doesn't make any sense. Surely, if I could delay the prayer, I could just wait until the end of the battle or wait till I'm safe and go and pray. So Allah is telling me in the Quran that in this very difficult situation, what do I do when I'm being shot at? What do I do when I'm in a horseback in the middle of a battlefield? What do I do when I'm the army is in front of me? What if the army is behind me? What of this? What of that? The whole system about how to pray in war, and yet apparently you can just change the prayer for a need. That makes no sense. I.e., if you cannot change the prayer for duress, for a darura, it makes no sense that the Sharia should allow you to change it for a need. That doesn't make any sense. That's like saying if you're about to die, you can't break your fast, but if you're sick, you can. What? It's like that. No, it's not like that. If you're sick and it's very difficult, you can break your fast. And by a fortiori, if you would die if you didn't break your fast, you can break your fast. Right? That's just normal logic. The Sharia works in the basic logic. So does it make any sense that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala should allow you to join a prayer for a need, but not allow you to join it for a dire need? Doesn't make any sense. And then the verse comes, Inna salata kanat al-mu'minina kitab mawquta. Kanat, it was and ever will be that the prayer is obligatory in fixed appointed times. Okay, and then the lens, let's look at the lens that they're using now. Okay, so you're quoting Nafi' from Ibn Umar. Fantastic, very interesting. Okay, he says we do not apply to we don't do that. So the only time we're going to change that is on Hajj. Hajj is a sacred time. The Prophet joined Dhuhr and Asr and Maghrib and Isha. Everybody visited, every saw it. It was witnessed by everybody. That is the only exception. Abdullah Mas'ud, he said the Prophet never joined any prayers apart from on Hajj. Okay, so you have a hadith, we have a hadith. قال محمد بلغنا أن عمر بن الخطاب أنه كتب في الآفاق ينهاهم أن يجمعوا بين الصلاتين ويخبرهم أن الجمع بين الصلاتين في وقت واحد كبيرة من الكبائر وأخبرنا بذلك الثقات عن العلاء بن الحارث عن مكحول. So Imam Muhammad says, a report of Ibn Umar has reached us. He wrote to the outlying lands. Obviously, he heard that some people are joining prayers. Perhaps it was mistaken. Perhaps they were following a rukhsa. Regardless of what he was doing, just like Sayyidina Umar legislated and joined everybody together with for the 20 rakats of Taraweeh. Similarly, he wrote a letter saying, prohibiting them from combining two prayers and telling them that combining two prayers in one time is of the major wrong actions. We have been told this by trustworthy narrators, narrating from Ala ibn Harith from Makhul al-Shami. This is Makhul al-Shami, who was conquered, he was a slave taken from, just like Nafi', freed slave. Makhul al-Shami was a POW, prisoner of war, taken into slavery when they conquered Kabul, right, in Afghanistan. So he was the Mufti of Damascus who couldn't speak Arabic properly, right? So now, like, we're not going to do that. Sayyidina Umar himself told people don't join. So we are going to look at these hadiths in this thing. I don't care what Ibn Umar said. I care about what Umar said. Who's Ibn Umar compared to Umar? Even if Ibn Umar was right that the Prophet, even if Ibn Abbas, you also have to look at the age of people, right? The age of people. Ibn Abbas is young. He's a young man, right? Ibn Umar, a young man. Sayyidina Umar, he was there, he was an adult. He's one of the greatest of the fuqaha ever, right? And so notice how they're looking at the hadith that you're reading and I'm reading, and they're looking through a lens. He's looking through the Kufan school. We do not join prayers. It doesn't exist. And that's why, for example, and then we're going to extend that. In the Hanafi school, a woman finishes her period in Asr time. What does she do? She makes ghusl and prays Asr. Whereas for the Jumhur, in the prayer, when everybody else who says you join prayers, they're going to say, well, you know, Asr is kind of a time for Dhuhr, right? It's part of the Daruri time, right? The whole idea of Daruri time does not exist for the Hanafis because they don't have the concept of joining prayers anyway. So they're going to say, no, if you become eligible to pray in the Daruri time, you're going to have to pray Dhuhr and Asr because it's not Qada yet, right? You're going to still have to pray it. It's now considered Ada when you pray Dhuhr and Asr in Asr time because you are incapable of praying, right? You're going to still do that, okay? And so again, you're looking through a lens, right? And so the analogy between joining prayers on the journey and joining prayers when you just finished your period is not very clear. But why do they all agree? The Shafi'is, the Malikis, and Hanbalis, they're all looking through the lens of certain Sahaba that joined. Make sense?
Yeah.
Yes, Sheikh.
So the best thing to do on a journey, of course, is to join and then repeat. When you're sick, join and then repeat. Take the rukhsah with the resolve that you're going to pray the prayer in its time as well. Right? You're throwing up every 2 minutes. Pray Dhuhr and Asr now, as soon as Dhuhr comes in, where the nausea has subsided, and have the resolve, inshallah ta'ala, if I'm good enough, I'm going to pray Asr in its time as well. And you've covered yourself on both sides. Right? That's the upshot. But can we see that everybody is looking through a lens? Even Ibn Mundhir, who comes along and says, oh, actually, just the hadith, right? Ibn Mundhir is just the hadith says that. It doesn't say this or this. But even he has a lens. The problem is somebody who has no training, no basis, no background. You just say crazy things, right? They just come along and say crazy things. And again, if you talk to anybody about the whole issue about eating meat, right? I'm not trying to pat myself on the back. Look at my recording on eating meat. You will see qawaid at play. I'm talking about what happens, a whole system. What happens if there is a ta'arud, if there's a conflict between the zahir, what is most likely, and the asl, and what is the default? In meat, do I go with the asl, that the default meat is haram, or do I go with the zahir, which is I go with what is most apparent, what is most obvious? Whereas somebody else is talking about like some crazy thing. And so I remember once there was a modern quote unquote Hanbali scholar who gave a fatwa on eating meat, okay, that comes from the West or is in the West, okay? And so I showed it to a Hanbali. I said, is this the Hanbali madhab? He's like, of course not. It's just coming out of nowhere, just his own interpretation of the hadith. And you see other people, I've seen a Hanafi do that as well, a modern Hanafi, interpret a hadith in a random way. And so the nice thing with a Hanbali or a Maliki or a Shafi'i or a Hanafi is I can at least hold him to take him to task. I can say what you're saying does not agree with what your scholars say, right? The problem is when someone's just Quran and Sunnah, the only thing you can do is take him to task on Judgment Day, right? That's what you can do. But he has no training, he has no lens, he has nothing that he's looking at. He's just kind of like a rookie, right? And just not very useful. Am I making sense?
Yes. Can you send that video, Sheikh, of the meat?
If you just go on YouTube, you should be able to find it. YouTube at Free Dingle Halal
Okay.
Meat. Yeah, I have a whole thing on it. So it's a playlist for thing playlist. Okay, making sense, inshallah. So
Yeah.
it's very
Alhamdulillah.
important to do this. Like let's say I'm a Maliki, particularly Maliki or Hanafi. Like sometimes it's like it just seems totally crazy. Like the Hadith says one thing, and we're doing the opposite. Like I don't get it. That's because you're not seeing the lens that they're looking through, right? But even as a Shafi or a Hanbali, same thing. Like, how is it you lent this way? Like the Hadith can be understood in two ways. Why is everybody leaning one way? Why is everybody going like this way? Like it's odd. You'd imagine, okay, the Hadith looks like it could be understood in two ways. You'd imagine it should be a 50-50 thing, and it's not. You're like, oh, that's strange. Because the amal, what the Salaf did is very, very important. Is very, very important. And the only people who reject that approach are whom? The only people who reject using the Salaf as a lens are what do they call themselves?
Salafi.
So it's one of the scenes. What's also slap the forehead, right? Subhanallah. So the way to understand the Quran and Sunnah is through the fiqh of the Salaf. The way to understand the fiqh of the Salaf is through the fiqh of the Khalaf. That's how it is. If you cut out the Khalaf, you will not understand the Salaf. If you cut out the Salaf, you have bid'ah. That's what you have. That's how it is. The way to understand the Quran and Sunnah is through the Salaf. Right? Who wrote the book that proving that the fiqh of the Salaf was better than, that the knowledge of the Salaf was better than the Khalaf? Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali. Who wrote the book that we should have to follow the form of Dhahib? Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali. Oh, thought you said Salaf. Salaf didn't follow Madhahib. That's wrong. They did follow Madhahib. And they created the form of Madhahib. That's why we follow the form of Madhahib. Right? But if you go outside the form of Madhahib, you can bet your bottom dollar that you're going to come up with something crazy. And you're going to come up with bid'ah. Right? Case in point, who joins prayers without reason for every day? Shia. Shia, they pray 5 times a day, right? But they pray Dhuhr and Asr together and Maghrib and Isha together every day. Subhanallah. So you followed the hadith, you ended up becoming Shi'i. Right? We're not saying that's kufr, we're not saying this, but you see the point there. So I'll repeat, the way to understand Quran and Sunnah is through the eyes of the Salaf. The way to understand the Salaf is through the eyes of the Khalaf, the later scholars. You're going to study Khalil, you're going to understand what's happening in the Salaf. You're going to study Minhaj al-Talibin, Hidayah, right? Mughni of Ibn Qudama. That's how you're going to understand the fiqh of the Salaf. Same thing in Aqidah. Very simple. You just say, no, Salaf. Right? We're Salaf, you're going to end up with crazy ideas. Okay. May Allah protect us all. Side point, by the way, if you look at the hadiths, the sources of Imam Ahmad, Imam Abu Hanifa is not only studying with Kufans, by the way. He's studying with Meccans and he's studying with Medinas as well. So it's not that they don't know anything other than their school, it's that they prefer their school to other people. Right? And so here, for example, Makhul al-Shami is in Damascus. Right? Shami in Damascus, right? Sham means Damascus. And so Imam Muhammad, he's studying with Imam Malik. He does change some of his ijtihadat, but he is essentially Kufan. Okay, he's essentially Kufan.
By essentially Kufan, you mean like his lenses through
His
Kufan.
lenses that he uses, he's Kufan. His general
Okay.
tack is Kufan. Right? And he'll keep saying our fuqaha, meaning the Kufans. So that reminds us of the other concept.
Oh.
The Salaf weren't Maliki. Yes, they were, because the Medinan school, who were the Salaf, and Imam Malik is Salaf anyway, created the Maliki school. So the Maliki school did not begin with Imam Malik. It's called the label. He is the main kind of cornerstone. He was a key thing in it, so we call it the Maliki school. But the Maliki school precedes Imam Malik. Similarly, the Hanafi school precedes Imam Abu Hanifa. So it neither started with Imam Hanifa nor did it end with him. Right? And the Maliki school did not start with Imam Malik, nor did it end with him. Right? It's just a name we put around it. They're not necessarily correct. The fatwa of Imam Malik is not necessarily the fatwa of the Maliki school. The fatwa of Imam Shafi is not necessarily the Shafi school, etc. Right? It's a school. Right? Okay. Okay, let's go on to, should we stop here or go on to the next chapter? Yeah, let's just stop here, inshallah ta'ala. But again, we see the methodology. So yes, for Imam Shafi, it's less, right? Yes, the lens is thinner and a lot less complex. And for Imam Malik, it's slightly different. Imam Hanafi is slightly different, right? But they have a lens, as opposed to you're just reading a hadith, you have no idea what you're doing. Okay?
Shaykh,
Yes.
regarding Imam Muhammad, you said like he is basically Kufan.
Mm-hmm.
Because we see so many disagreements between the Sahibain and Abu Hanifa, right?
Yeah, but they
So,
are not super fundamental. So the system that Imam Muhammad is using is essentially Hanafi. There are some usuli differences, but they are very minor. So they're either going to be superficial, meaning we agree on the usul, but we disagree on the furu', or it's going to be the furu' are very similar. The usul is very similar, right? Just like Imam Muzani and Imam Shafi, there's debates, but they don't agree. They agree on usul though, generally speaking. So
okay,
Imam Muhammad is essentially Kufan and essentially Hanafi, right? He's still working within that system, and he's not essentially anything else, right? Just like Imam Tahawi, he disagrees, I think, with all of them in some particular issues, but he's still essentially in that system. He's working within that system. Ibn Mundhir disagrees with Imam Shafi, but works within that same system of Imam Shafi, right? So they call it a mujtahid muntasib, not mujtahid mutlaq. Mujtahid mutlaq, you have totally your own usul, right? So Imam Shafi fundamentally disagrees with Imam Malik and fundamentally disagrees with Imam Muhammad and fundamentally disagrees with everybody. And he has his own usul. These are my usul. And then the Shafi'is, they work within that usul. And they may agree or disagree in furu' and their conclusions. But they are like maybe an exception is Ibn Jarir al-Tabari, he's slightly different in usul. But basically, let's say Muhammad ibn Nasr al-Marwazi, Muhammad ibn Mundhir, Ibn Khuzaymah, right? They might have different answers, but they are essentially Shafi'is. That's what they are, right? Qadi Abu
okay.
Bakr
So,
ibn Arabi, he has some of his own fatwa, but he is essentially Maliki, right? Go ahead, Muhammad Aman.
Oh, I think it was someone else.
Okay, go ahead,
yes, yeah,
Muzaffar.
yes, yes. So, like we just spoke about Salafis, right? They're trying to like basically reinvent the wheel. So
Yeah,
we
so
have some,
it's not reinvent the wheel. It's just it's empty. Is that I'm studying fiqh, okay? Let's say I'm studying Salafi fiqh, okay? What do when I study Salafi fiqh, I have two things. When I study normal fiqh, I have four things. So when I'm studying Salafi fiqh, my sheikh, he gave me answers, okay? He gave me answers and he gave me a hadith. So I'm going around quoting these hadiths, okay? And these verses of the Quran. So I have we have adillah, dalil, and I have answers, right? Half of them are going around just quoting their sheikh, right? But otherwise, like an advanced Salafi, has his own answers, right? Because he doesn't do taqleed. So he has his answer, okay? And he has his proof. Normal fiqh has your answer, your qawaid fiqhiyya, your qawaid usuliyya, and your proofs. Does that make sense? So when I'm
yes,
studying Shafi fiqh, I am learning four things. I'm learning the answer, this breaks your wudu. I'm learning the qawaid fiqhiyya, how to use these bigger rulings, the kind of more abstract rulings. I'm learning how the usul was to get to those conclusions on both levels. And I'm looking at how the usul is applied to that particular question and get to the conclusion. I'm learning four things, whereas a Salafi is learning two things.
right.
So the Salafi has a
So,
lens, but he doesn't know what his lens is. His lens, for example, is everything's bid'ah. His lens is I don't know what his lens is. Like so he doesn't know his usul. He doesn't have usul. It's like, define your usul so that I can hold you to something. He doesn't have it. Like, right? He doesn't have usul. What is qawaid al-fiqh of the mention a qaida fiqhiyya. You could mention qawaid fiqhiyya that are unique to the Shafis. Give me a qaida fiqhiyya that's unique to the Salafis. It doesn't exist. So that like
right.
it's essentially hollow. Like they don't have fiqh because it's not even happening. Like you can't pick up a book. So you can do ikhtilaf. For example, somebody wrote a book recently, ikhtilaf between Bin Baz, Albani, and some Ibn Taymiyyah, right? So they have ikhtilaf, okay? It's a bit like Imam Hanifa and the Sahibain, right? A'udhu billahi, what a comparison, okay? But there's no usul and there's no qawa'id. And so the qawa'id are going to be very loose. Now, Ibn Uthaymeen is a bit of an exception because Ibn Uthaymeen is a bit of an exception because he's essentially a Hanbali, right? And he has a sharh on the qawa'id fiqhiyya of Ibn Rajab. The issue is then with Ibn Uthaymeen, it's like, we're going to hold you to that. If you say something that steps out of the Hanbali school, we can hold you to it, right? You say, hey, this doesn't make sense, right? So at least he is slightly different. But otherwise, you know, with like someone like Albani, right? It's just not there. Like it's just like very
Right.
nebulous usul, very loose usul. In a case in point, I was in the haram, okay, and in the haram you're supposed to they're giving fatwa, okay. So these are Hanbalis apparently, and they have what are they reading? They're reading the Muhalla of Ibn Hazm. Ibn Hazm is Zahiri. So what is your usul then? What's your usul? Are you Zahiri? So it's like me using a Hanafi fiqh book. Hanafi fiqh book is fundamentally different. Like it doesn't make any sense. Or like, it's like what are you doing? Or like it's like oh, what kind of fuel do you put in your car? Diesel or petrol? Like I fuel. I say, Habibi, you have a serious problem. I say, why? Have you driven anywhere yet? No. I've only been driving for 100 years, right? Salafism, right? I've only been driving for 100 years. So, okay, well, drive for a bit. See what happens to your engine if you put in diesel in a petrol engine. You tell me what happens, right? Or vice versa. Because it's an empty
Yeah.
system, right? So
Yeah.
when we study fiqh, so when you study fiqh, you're studying four things: the answer, the meta answer, the legal maxims, the meta answer, the usuli principles, and the adilla, the specific proofs themselves. And you're learning how that whole matrix works. Whole system. It's like a whole system that goes together, right? Salafi fiqh is hollow in that it has the answer and one half of the proof, right? Which is the hadith or this verse of the Quran. But it lacks the other half of the proof, which is the adilla al-ijmaliyya, which is usul, and it lacks qawa'id fiqhiyya. There's no such thing as qawa'id fiqhiyya, right? Someone's gonna write qawa'id fiqhiyya and the salaf. Like, what are you talking about? That's not a thing. That doesn't exist, right? You don't have.
Right. So, uh, my question was like, there are some people today. I think he's quite famous in the UK. This Hanafi alim. He says he's Hanafi, and he's trying to like totally reject the Sahibain and the whole Hanafi mazhab that's been developed, and he wants to directly jump to the opinions of Imam Abu Hanifa only, and he says he's a Hanafi. So, what problem
That's
is there a
slightly
problem
different.
with that?
That's slightly different. That's an intune. So that's Atabek, right? Is that right?
Yes, yes, he feels
Yeah.
Mutazili also at times.
Yeah, so that's something different. That's a different thing. That's a kind of internal subtlety about tarjih in the Malik in the Hanafi school, etc. So that's something else, right? And that's another totally different discussion.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, will that be overstepping boundaries?
That's beyond. That's more specific than what we're talking about, right? That's more specific than we're talking about. So somebody who's like, whereas, so but when I was saying with the Salafi, is like you just lack. So that there's so many things you lack, right? It's just like, for example, you get a Protestant, somebody who's a Protestant talking to a Catholic priest. It's like totally different. Catholicism, long history, long discussions, all these books, all these things. Protestantism, 400 years. It's like, and half of it is just like it created yesterday. So like, what books represent your sect? Like nothing. It's just kind of like a non-thing, right? Karate versus Aman Do. Aman comes up with a martial art today. Like, there's no discussion on anything. It's just empty. right? So that's what's going on. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
جزاكم
جزاكم الله
الله خير إن شاء
خيرا.
الله تعالى. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. سبحان الله وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك.